Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and among the many currents on the world Jewish scene today, one that is appreciated by many Jews across the spectrum of synagogue affiliation is the Chabad movement, which has touched the lives of countless numbers of Jews and inspired many on the fringes of the Jewish community to become comfortable with their Jewishness, give them a sense of being welcomed into Jewish life. Chabad is doing Jewish outreach here in America and throughout the world. It's the closest thing the Jewish community has to missionaries, in the sense that Chabad sends people anywhere. Anywhere there are Jews, anywhere on the globe, the shlichim are sent by Chabad. And when you speak with ordinary Jews who've experienced Chabad, the common theme, expression you'll hear is, they made me feel welcome, and they cared about me. The overarching message of Chabad is, every Jew matters, regardless of how observant or non-observant they are, regardless of their belief, level of knowledge, level of participation in Jewish life. By the way, the word Chabad is actually a Hebrew acronym comprised of the first letter of three Jewish attributes standing for three different Jewish values, priorities. Chochmah, which means wisdom, Bina, which means understanding, and Da'at, which means knowledge. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge is the meaning of Chabad. Chabad is part of the Hasidic community, which is Orthodox and is committed to Halakha, Jewish law. And Chabad is also known as Lubavitch, which refers to the Yiddish name of the village in Belarus, which was where the original leaders of the Chabad movement lived for more than 100 years. The most well-known modern Rebbe of Chabad was the late Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the fifth in a direct line of succession of Schneersons who served as leader of Chabad. And it was Menachem Schneerson who truly shaped today's extraordinary Chabad movement as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. From 1951 until his passing in 1994 at the age of 92. And virtually every person who was able to spend a moment with the Rebbe felt they had been in the presence of the divine. And many of his followers proclaimed Menachem Schneerson to be the Messiah and preached that he would return after his death to issue in an age of redemption. On this edition of L'Chaim, I'm pleased to be sitting with one of the leaders of Chabad, who is himself a remarkable human being, doing some wonderful work on the world Jewish scene. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Rabbi David Eliezrie, Chabad's national liaison to Jewish federations of North America, and he is the first Chabad rabbi to be on the board of governors of the Jewish Agency. David Eliezrie is also the founder director of California's North County Chabad Center, and is the rabbi of Congregation Beth Meir HaKohen in Yorba Linda, California. And David is the author of a highly regarded book on Chabad entitled The Secret of Chabad, Inside the World's Most Successful Jewish Movement. David, it is an honor to have you at this table.
It's a pleasure and honor to be with you.
Thank you so very much for making the trip out here and sitting with me. You and I had a wonderful pleasure of meeting at a JPOST conference, and in one moment, I was very taken by you, so it's a real kick for me to have you at this table. Thank you.
I've watched you on the on JV on the television and on the internet, many of your shows. So it's a pleasure to be here in person.
That's very flattering. So let's talk for one moment about you. Where were you born, and what was your own personal Jewish background?
My own story is I was born as a child in Canada, but I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to a non-Orthodox day school. My family moved to Montreal when I was a young teenager, and the yeshiva down the block was a Chabad yeshiva.
Huh.
As they say in Yiddish, ich habe reingefallen, I fell in. And
what was your family like? And you said you were modern Orthodox?
It was a religiously observant Jewish family.
Yes.
I mean, in those days, the amount of Jews that were observant in the 50s and 60s were very small. And the differences that we find today, everybody was more pushed together. And, but they were religious Jews and observant Jews. And they sent me to Jewish day schools, which was very unusual at the time. And then when we moved to Montreal, the school that happened to be down the block was
when you moved to?
Montreal. My family moved to Montreal around 1966, I think it was. 65, 66. I was a teenager. And the yeshiva down the block was a Chabad yeshiva. It was literally a few hundred yards from the house. So I went to Chabad yeshiva.
Did you take to it right away?
I was very enamored with the rabbinical students who had a certain fire in their gut that was really very special. And I used to study every day with some of the yeshiva boys in the evening. There was a rabbinical school it's still there, which is connected to the yeshiva, the high school, and the regular program. And I was very taken by these young men and their sense of passion for Judaism, which was so real. And then a few months, I was there maybe about 4 or 5 months, 6 months, and they went off to Brooklyn and they told me I could have this kind of trip to New York. I was 14 years old. I'd never been to New York. I was like excited. I didn't understand the Hasidic element of it so much, but I figured, you know what, for a weekend, why not? They offered me a weekend in Brooklyn. I'm going to go. And that was the first time I encountered the Rebbe, which I had a very profound personal experience. And I saw something there that was very unique and very special.
Okay. You heard me say a moment ago, everyone who's ever told me they had this privilege of being in his presence felt that they were touched by something extraordinary, that there was something most unusual about him as a human being. Tell me about your experience.
Well, my experience was, the first time I came on a Friday night to the shul, and the Rebbe was leading the davening, and I stood there from a distance watching. But I think it was Sunday night or Monday night, the boys were going to go back the next morning to Montreal, and I wanted to get my last look at the Rebbe. And I didn't understand Yiddish in the sense I had gone to the Hasidic gathering, it's called the Farbrengen on Shabbos afternoon, but I really didn't understand what was going on. But I knew there was something special here. And I decided I'm going to come back to that iconic building on Eastern Parkway, so what we call 770 in the Jewish world today, 770 Eastern Parkway, and I'm going to get another glimpse of the Rebbe. So I came into the synagogue, and they were having the evening services at a small sanctuary to the right when you came in, and it was full. So I tried to get in, I couldn't get in, I tried to go around the back, I couldn't go around the back. So I stood in this lobby between the Rebbe's office and the sanctuary in front of the elevator. And I figured I'll catch a glimpse as he walks across the hall. So he briskly walks across the hall, and standing at the door to the sanctuary, and this whole sanctuary was only 600-700 square feet, it's a very small room, was his chief aide, Rabbi Chodakov, like a sentry. And for some reason, I decided to follow him in. Now, there is protocols in the Hasidic world,
yes.
Just like there's protocols in Buckingham Palace, Lahavdil, there's protocols in the Hasidic world. You don't follow the Rebbe in the room. He's the last person to go in a room. So I start walking right after him. I'm a young teenager. I don't have the exact black hat like a Chabad kid. I don't have what they call the Hasidic Schnit, the look of a Hasidic child. Clearly, I was in a different place. And he starts to close the door on me. And I'm halfway in and halfway out. Rabbi Chodakov, the Rebbe's
yes.
chief secretary, his chief of staff. And the people inside tell me to get out. And I'm half in, I'm half out. It's like a kid caught by like you're in the road in the light in the middle of the night, like a deer caught by the lights. And suddenly, which was so out of character, because the Rebbe would walk in a room and there was always a bit of tumult and he would always act oblivious. He turns around and says, who's this kid? And he turns to Rabbi Chodakov and he tells him with his hand to open the door. And he turns to me and he says, come stand next to me. Now, what I felt at that moment was here was a confused young teenager who had broken the rules of the protocol. But he looked beyond what I did to see that more importantly, he needs to draw me closer. And I thought that that was really what he did to the Jewish people. You know, the chief rabbi of England, the Lord, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, he says that Hitler chased down 6 million Jews with hatred, and the Rebbe chased down 6 million Jews with love. And he did it one at a time. So here he sees this young kid, and I was extremely touched because as I stood there, and he's praying out of this old siddur, this old prayer book, you felt the sense of sanctity and holiness. And later I had personal meetings with him, so you get it, as you get older, you have a whole different understanding of the whole thing. I was just a young kid at the time. But I felt that sense of personal connection. And this really, I think, which was so unique, because so many of us deal with the macros and we don't deal with the micro. And what the Rebbe's, I think, unique style was to reach out to each Jew in the micro and to touch him or her in something in a special way, to make them feel valued and make them feel important and make what they're doing very important.
What did he say to you?
Said nothing. I stood next to him. He stood next to me. That wasn't, he didn't speak. Just stand next to me. That was the motion. I want you standing next to me. That was it.
How long did you stand next to him?
For the whole service, 15 minutes, as long as it was. And this was quite unprecedented. I spent many times I went to Mincha, the afternoon services, and Ma'ariv, the evening services, in the years to come that were in the sanctuaries. I got older, hundreds of times. Never did I see him tell somebody to stand next to him. It was like the only time I ever saw it in history.
Now, you then did meet him personally?
Yes, a series of times.
Later in time?
Right.
Under what circumstances?
Well, what happened, at that time when we went to New York, the high school kids had a private meeting with him. There was like 10, 15 of us. But later on, before my family immigrated to Israel, a year or two later, I had private meetings with him before I got married, and when my wife was pregnant, before we became Chabad emissaries. And there was many times I encountered him on Sunday mornings with the dollars, and numerous times. And there was many times I wrote questions to the Rebbe back and forth. And so what you had here was, you felt there was two elements here which were different. Number one, you felt you encountered a human being who had a revelation of sanctity, holiness, and you felt there was emotional honesty. So many of us, you know, we look for the truth in ourselves. And I think that the Rebbe reflected truth and sanctity. And when you encountered him, you had to face the truths in yourself, because you felt here was a person of total emotional honesty, and that caused you to look for the emotional honesty within yourself.
Mm-hmm. People have talked to me about his eyes. Did his eyes in some way touch you?
Without question, the eyes touched me. You know who really spoke about this so interestingly enough? Was the late Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin. He came to the Rebbe, and a friend of mine took him on the Rebbe's 70th birthday, and he didn't want to go. He was the Israeli ambassador to the United States. The president of Israel, Zalman Shazar, at the time, who was a Chabad follower, a chassid in many ways, said, "You need to bring the blessings of the state of Israel to the Rebbe." And he was accompanied by the late Rabbi Yehuda Avner, the famous ambassador, who told me the story. And he walked in there like, what am I doing here? And suddenly he found this kinship with the Rebbe, and he spoke years later about this meeting that he had, and the Rebbe's eyes that reached into his soul. So again, I think a lot of it had to do with most people, when you deal with them, you're always wondering what's the very core of what they are. In the Rebbe, there was a purity of spirit that was so special and so rare. You felt you encountered holiness and honesty.
Mm-hmm. What's your reaction when you hear people say he was the Messiah?
I say I don't know who the Messiah is. I think that the question really is not relevant to us, and I think the issue is that what the Rebbe wanted us to do was to bring Mashiach. And the way we bring Mashiach is by bringing more holiness into the world and more goodness, more kindness. And that's the central message. And I really feel that issue has faded to a very large degree.
It has, by the way.
And
by the way, it faded because he didn't return.
Well, it's not a question.
There were billboards, huge billboards.
You have something very interesting about Chabad people. One of the interesting things about Chabad people that maybe outsiders don't understand, it's a community of individualists. It's a community of phenomenal creativity. It's not a community that works from the top down, it works from the bottom up. So if one person feels a certain way, he's going to go do something about it. It doesn't take a lot of people to pay for a billboard, especially in Israel. So the fact that somebody put up a billboard, this was not like sanctioned by the community.
I don't think that's true.
Well, that's
at the time. This was widespread.
It was there was
Certainly in Brooklyn.
there was definitely an element, but I don't think that this is what his message was. His message was that we can bring the world to a spiritual tipping point. And what I think the Rebbe did here was so intriguing. For years, the concept in Judaism that there'll be a Mashiach who's going to transform the world into an era of goodness and holiness was in the theological closet. And okay, we had the UN, they're going to bring us peace. That didn't work too well. And we have this hope and that hope. And this was always a central idea in Judaism. And this was a fundamental tenet. We see this in Maimonides, in the Code of Jewish Law, in the Talmud, et cetera, et cetera. And what he did is he took it from this theological closet and he put it into the Jewish mainstream. Now, following his passing, many people struggled with this issue. But what we do see now, 20-some-odd years later, 23 years later, is that the vitality of the Rebbe's teachings and the influence today, his influence today, is so dramatically larger than before his passing, it's really remarkable. Mm-hmm. In fact, it says in the Talmud that the influence of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, after he passes is even greater. I've been traveling around the world on this book tour. I was in South Africa, I was in Europe, I was in Israel. It's amazing to see the transformation in world Jewry because of what the Rebbe did. And I don't believe it's the peripheral. Today it's the mainstream.
Define it. Describe it. What's the difference?
It depends. First thing what the Rebbe did was he put Jewish spirituality and the connection with God and Torah on the center stage. In other words, if you look at the post-Holocaust era, in the 50s and the 60s, people ran to the suburbs here, at least in America, and they wanted to build large synagogues and temples and have Hebrew schools and play mahjong and basketball with other Jews, which is all wonderful. There's nothing wrong with playing mahjong. They wanted to build the state of Israel, which is a very lofty, important goal to do. And they thought they'll remember the Holocaust and fight anti-Semitism. Comes the Rebbe, and he says, that's not the central agenda. These are important things, but the central agenda of the Jewish people is their connection to God, their connection to Torah, how they live, how they operate. Do they observe mitzvahs and traditions? And what he did was bring Jewish observance back into mainstream Judaism. Now, there was a tremendous...
I'm sorry. I don't understand that statement.
What I mean is that the idea of observing mitzvahs. When the Rebbe started the tefillin campaign in 1967...
Yes.
So we went to the streets, he started putting on tefillin people. First they said to you, Du bist doch meshuga, are you crazy? And now, what Jew doesn't expect when he comes to the wall in Jerusalem or if he walks down the street in Manhattan that a Jew's going to say to him, would you like to do a mitzvah, put on tefillin?
That's not what the Rebbe meant. The Rebbe meant that he wants that guy to go home and lay tefillin in his own home.
Eventually he wants that. But you see...
And when you tell me that you think there's a difference now in the level of observance as you travel
100%.
world Jewry, nah.
I'm seeing two opposite trends in world Jewry. First, I'll tell you what I'm seeing. Number one, let's look at the United States first. And no question in the United States we have strong numbers of assimilation. But on the flip side, the amount of Jews that are observant today, and you had Orthodox Jews in the 40s and 50s, but they were very passively observant and they were uneducated. There's an old saying that demographers lie, but pizza shops don't lie. There's more kosher pizza shops today in New Jersey, New York. I was today in Teaneck in a pizza shop. We're seeing a phenomenal growth in Jewish observance and tradition. There's a shift in this country.
For you to say phenomenal staggers me.
I'll tell you the reason why I'm saying that.
Phenomenal?
Phenomenal. I'll tell you the reason why.
If you're telling me there are pockets.
No, and I'll give you an example.
Pockets.
There's pockets.
I believe you're right.
I'll tell you
to
where.
Say phenomenal.
Okay,
David,
so let me tell you where I'll say phenomenal.
What world you're living in.
Let me tell you phenomenal. In the northeastern United States, there's heavy pockets of Orthodox Jews. I agree with you. The Jewish Federation of Broward County, not the most observant Jewish community in the universe. Florida. Just did a demographic survey a few months ago, and a similar one was done in Miami 2 years earlier. A phenomenal statistic comes out. 27% of the Jews in Broward say they are active in Chabad. Now, many of those Jews are far from fully observant.
But why do you say it that way? They're not observant at all.
No, I don't agree.
They are not.
No, I don't.
The only thing they do is come to a Chabad house or Chabad service and feel wonderful there.
I don't agree with you. I run a Chabad center like that in suburban California.
No.
And what happens, what I see among Jews. No. Okay, so let me tell you where I disagree with you. I'm a frontline guy also. I'm not just the guy who comes to New York, but I'm also the frontline guy. And what I see is a shift in attitudes among many Jews because the messaging they're getting is a messaging toward tradition. When I get up there on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to speak to my crowd of a few hundred people, who you can count on a couple of hands who are really fully observant, the message that I'm giving to them about the learning of Torah and observing a mitzvahs, the transformation in their lives is a step-by-step transformation. One of the important things Chabad always saw, which was different than other parts of, let's say, the Orthodox world, is that change is incremental. And you have a Jew who never observed the Shabbos in his life, and now he does it once a month. And you had a Jew who never put on tefillin, and now he does it once a week. And you have a Jew who never went to Israel, and now he's been 3 times. And you had a Jew who never gave tzedakah, never gave charity, and now he supports the local Jewish Federation or AIPAC or Chabad or whatever organization is doing noble things in the Jewish world. In other words, you do not roll back 100, 150 years of assimilation with hocus pocus, everything goes fast. It's reaching Jews where they are and encouraging them to make another step and another step and another step transformation. The very fact that 27% of the Jews in Broward County are walking into an Orthodox institution where historically they didn't, where they're willing to sit, in the more traditional sense, and the rabbi is giving them a different kind of message. It's a really very different kind of, is a teutonic shift in the way Jews are affiliating in America. We have 1,000 centers, 950 centers in the United States and Canada. And what we're seeing so intriguingly is remarkable growth. You go to what's his name? Is it Butte, Montana? Bozeman, Montana. Chabad is building a beautiful facility. You go to Miami Beach. You see they just built a $20 million building. But new Miami Beach is the Miami Beach. But when you see it in Prescott, Arizona, and when you see it in suburban Orange County, California, and Jews are coming, and the messaging and the learning of Torah. For instance, we have a program called JLI, the Jewish Learning Institute. We had 30,000 people in the last course. That's magnificent numbers. Is there a lot of Jews who didn't come? Without question. But the fact of the matter is there is a shift, there's a realignment of American Jewry on a grassroots toward tradition.
I'm going to react to you.
Mm-hmm.
You understand there are ways in which you and I are in the same business. I tell people all the time, I am not in the television business. I'm in the Yohev Yisrael business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using television as a tool. Since I was first in rabbinical school 1,000,000 years ago, the Jewish community has said the same thing till today. What we need is widespread dissemination of information and knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and some way to inspire people who are on the fringe to come in, and also a way to constantly reinforce the committed base of the Jewish community. And there's never been any Jewish educational initiative of a media nature that compares with what JBS is doing.
Fair enough. I agree with you.
Okay. And I have enormous regard for the way in which Chabad has created a service to the world, to world Jewry. American Jewry is a fraction of what you do.
I know American Jewry, and the dynamics in other countries is very different.
Okay. But you have saved Jewish lives around, when I say you, Chabad has saved Jewish lives around the world. And you have kindled a flame. You've awakened something in many Jews that I would argue was lying dormant. Not that it wasn't there, but it was dormant. So kol hakavod to all the work that's being done. But I talk to leaders of every movement. Reform Judaism, conservative Judaism, modern Orthodoxy, Chabad, they all tell me the same thing. Their movement is exploding. There's a tectonic change in their membership. And all I know is that I interact with Jews all the time and hear from Jews all over America. And the vast majority of Jewish life is a Jewish wilderness.
You are correct, but
my
point is something. But I want to say
there is incremental.
There is incremental changes.
I don't disagree
at all.
But
I'm saying something else also. When 27%, I'll tell you even more intriguing. In the Miami survey 2 years earlier, they asked a different question. Jews 35 and younger, 47% said they were active with Chabad. I was blown away by that statistic. Now let's be honest. It could be they came to the Hanukkah menorah once a year at the mall.
Right.
But I'm not being dishonest.
I just want our audience to understand
right, but
what we mean
what
here.
we mean by that. But see, there is also
it
goes in circles. There is the people very intimately involved and less intimately involved, and less intimately involved. But what I'm saying is that there is a shift in the way Jews are identified. When I started off as a Chabad Shliach over 40 years ago, they looked at us as something cute and quaint like Fiddler on the Roof, you know what I mean? If I was, we got this cute Hasidic Jew. Now, all of those people who looked at us as quaint and cute, they are sitting in our classrooms, they are supporting our work, they are being challenged with their own Jewish identity. I'm not unrealistic enough to think the Jewish world has been fundamentally changed. But what I'm saying, it's like turning around an aircraft carrier. It's a very, very big job. And you're only going to do it one Jew at a time. And this was the approach that Chabad took. This was the Rebbe's approach. That's how he touched me. And hopefully through that, I touched other people. And it's a slow transformation. But what there is now is as much as there is a trend away, and there's a very strong trend away. At a 71% intermarriage rate in the non-Orthodox community, there's big challenges, as they say in Yiddish, Gereset Tzores. When you have now, according to a recent survey by the Jewish People's Planning Institute, that a significant percentage of young Jews are not getting married, and we're not going to have Jewish families, we have a very serious challenge ahead of us. But I also think that there's something else going on. As you mentioned, the other movements, I think we are challenging them, because we're saying to them, and a lot of the people who come to us are members of other movements because they want to get a little bit more intensive Jewish education. And I think we're challenging them also to look at their greater spiritual roots. Because for a long time, Judaism in America was moving in the direction of social action, and it still is to a large degree. But we're coming along with an argument that there's something much more deeper here. And we have to make Torah and Judaism relevant to their lives. So when a doctor is facing a moral dilemma, and he doesn't know what to do with a patient, he'll ask himself, what does the Torah teach me? When a lawyer is facing a spiritual question in his life, he's going to say, what does the Torah teach me? When a housewife is facing, a woman is educating her children and she wants to look into Jewish tradition, we want to make that possible. So this shift, it's a very slow shift because, listen, we're limited with resources. We're limited with manpower. But the day the Rebbe passed away, in 1994, there were 1,032 couples Chabad Shluchim in the world. Today, the number is about 4,500. And the other thing that's happening is that we've gone, I used to have you came to Yorba Linda, you would see this little farmhouse built in 1927. The mice had grandmothers and grandchildren and bubbas and zaydas. It was a rundown, Now I have a 2-acre campus with a beautiful building. You think that you walked into a Jewish Taj Mahal. It's a beautiful place. And because it's a nicer place, many more Jews will come to it. So my point here is, we're on one level, we have a great challenge. And by the way, the challenge in other countries is very different. The United States is a much greater challenge than other countries. But we are also seeing a shift. And the fact that 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, the Jew who was assimilated was unwilling to speak to me. And today, he will talk to me and say, what do you have to say? That's an important change.
You're absolutely right. And in no way do I want to suggest to our audience that I'm minimizing at all. There has been a change. And the change, as you say, is really at the beginning. When I was a young rabbi, the federation in my community really didn't want Chabad to be present. As far as they were concerned, Chabad was not a mainstream Jewish movement. Today, you're on the board of governors of the Jewish Agency, and in my home community, Rabbi Darren is acknowledged as any rabbi of any other synagogue in town. And the Chabad synagogue in my community is attended by Jews who are affiliated with other synagogues and by people who are unaffiliated. They don't, I argue with you, they don't leave the building and then live remotely halachic or traditional lifestyles, but they are drawn.
So I would put it this way. For many years, the train with the Jews on in this country was headed away. And now, not all of the people are on the same train, but they're on a train it's headed in a different direction towards.
Okay, and we're only arguing about how many are we on each
Right,
train.
That's
all.
Right, but the fact is that train of towards tradition. Now, of course, we
There are
have
more on your train than used to be.
and
But
100%.
they are still a very small piece of American
more
Jewry.
numbers than you think it is.
No, it is not.
Okay, number two, because we're seeing now, it's like, for instance, we created a new teen movement called C-Teens. We brought 2,000 teens to Brooklyn for the weekend and took them to Times Square on Saturday night, and made Havdalah with big pictures on the big screens. Now, I couldn't believe that we would bring 2,000 teens to New York. Should have we brought 20,000 teens? Yes, but we did bring 2,000
We're
teens.
not arguing that. We're arguing what happens the next day.
The next day,
Where are they the next day?
The next day,
and the next week. And when you don't have an event of magnitude that you've described with screens all over the place like Times Square, what happens then, David?
What we hope happens is that we have infused in this Jew a sense of connection with Torah, with God, with spirituality, that will make their lives a little bit different.
All right.
So if you see success, the way some in the Orthodox community do, that unless you become fully observant, then forget it. But that's not how we see success. We see success by every Jew doing another mitzvah, every Jew going closer to tradition, every Jew connecting in a more profound way with the spiritual essence of what it means to be a Jew.
It's lovely. Incidentally, does that apply in your mind to the incremental observance levels in the different movements of Judaism?
I think any Jew who does, any Jew who does a mitzvah, there's a value to that.
So is Reform Judaism, in your mind, a valuable Jewish expression of Jewish life because you're taking Jews who may have no sense of Shabbat?
I have a conflict. I'm very impressed by many of the rabbis and the people in the Reform movement and by their passion for Judaism. And I see many wonderful things that their rabbis and people and the members do. On the other level, I am troubled by a theology which changes fundamental core beliefs in Judaism. And the way I see this is I spoke recently for the graduating class of the conservative movement in the American Jewish University in California, which is the conservative movement's rabbinical school. And I was really impressed by the passion of the students. But on the flip side, I don't want to say I agree with the theology that changes core beliefs in Judaism.
But you don't care about theology.
No, I care about what the Jew does.
Yes.
And I would think that there's a very interesting thing happening on the grassroots. A lot of the relationships between conservative Reform rabbis and Chabad rabbis, a lot of times they live in the same communities, they have a lot of crossover of people, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what I find today about young conservative Reform rabbis is they go into the rabbinate because they're Jewish searchers. There was a generation, if you went back before the pre-World War II era, there were people that went into the liberal movements because they almost had a hostility to orthodoxy. Today, they have a desire to learn. And what I'm finding is they have this tremendous sense of curiosity. They want to know from us what we really think. And I think there's a lot of cross-fertilization going over. We're learning from them maybe how to be committed to, I'm learning from them a passion for Israel and the Jewish people. And I think they're learning from us a deeper spiritual passion which can impact their lives.
All I want to hear from you is yes, you believe that while you would love people to be more observant, Reform Judaism, conservative Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism have a Jewish validity exactly as you've described the philosophy of Chabad, one step at a time, what you use the word incrementally.
Incrementally. However, but my theological dilemma here
the theology is irrelevant to you.
So
so why do you bring it in?
I bring it in.
You and I know. I
Yeah.
want our audience to understand. Chabad is not about what you believe. And Jewish tradition is not about what you believe, it's how you behave.
It should behave, but I also
And that's
believe.
what you're talking
but
about.
I want to say I have to be very honest, which is I have a theological. I have very good friends who are former conservative rabbis.
By the way, why? It's like I have.
No, but I want to be. There's a theological difference which I think is very real.
Of course.
And so that theological difference I don't agree with, but their commitment to the Jewish people and their involvement in Judaism and their encouragement of Jews, I see a great treasure.
Okay, in Reform Judaism.
In the Reform movement, yes.
And conservative Judaism.
Right.
All the non-Orthodox movements. That doesn't mean that's where you would like Jews to be. But one of the criticisms, gentle as it is, that I hear of Chabad is people who attend Chabad, who are not observant Jews, and who are legitimately, authentically welcomed, don't understand that Chabad wants them to become traditional, observant, halachic Jews. That's what you want of them.
That's what we want of them, right?
Yes, and very often, the people who go there have no clue. Also, there is the feeling at times that the Jew goes to Chabad as a spectator. The Jew wants to see a real Jew.
Well, I think
the Chabad Jew is the real Jew.
Yeah, but I want to answer that with a story. There was a
You
Jew,
know what I'm talking
I
about.
understand what you're talking about. I want to relate to both issues. I think they're important. Number one, the second issue is there was a Jew in Curacao who once wrote a letter to Lubavitcher Rebbe, said, "I'm a small Jew from a small country." And the Rebbe responded to him, "There is no small Jew. Every person has great value." There is a very interesting balancing act that Chabad rabbis have. You want to make every Jew welcome, but you want them to grow within their tradition. And so sometimes you might have the tendency not to push a little bit when you should push. And I think that this is we need to have the courage to challenge our people. And I think many of us do, and sometimes maybe some of us fail not to be strong enough in
That's
that
very
direction.
honest of you.
One of the things that I've done very much is I've encouraged a lot of kids to go to Israel and a lot of kids to go to educational programs which will enhance their Jewish identity. Why? Because I feel if they get a Jewish education, they're going to become transformed.
I have more questions about Chabad, but I got off track in terms of your own story. You tell me you go to Israel. Your family moves to Israel.
My family made Aliyah in 1968.
Okay, I want to ask you a question in that context. You said a few moments ago that one of the things you've learned from non-Orthodox movements, from Reform and Conservative Judaism, your words, is a love for Israel. You lived in Israel. You've studied in Israel. What love did you learn from a non-Orthodox Jew that you didn't already have?
I think the fact that they care so much about Jewish destiny.
More than you do?
I very possibly more than I do.
Really?
Look at Jews who we're living in a time where probably one of the greatest mitzvahs of Jews of this generation is the mitzvah of tzedakah, of giving charity. Well, you look at Jews who are, let's say, far from religiously observant, but when it comes to a Jew who's hungry in Moscow and needs foods on the table, or it comes to a Jew who needs let's say, a hospital in Kiryat Gat, or is being shelled, and one of the things that impressed me being on the Jewish Agency was here's people giving of their time and energy who are far less religiously observant than I am. They're coming from a very different theological place than I am. But their passion for the Jewish people is so real that I walked out I've been there for 2 years, and I said to myself, this is a serious group of campers. They really care. And I was very impressed how it's so central to who they are as human beings and as Jews. And that willingness to give of their resources and give of their times, because let's be very honest, the Jewish Agency is really the elite of the Jewish world. It's the elite leaders of Jewish organizations and the top tier of Jewish philanthropists in the world.
Explain to our viewers what the Jewish Agency does.
The Jewish Agency was the organization that established the State of Israel. And after the state was established, it took on responsibility for immigration to Israel, and in later years it's taken responsibility for fostering Jewish identity and creating programs to uplift Judaism throughout the world. And it has a massive budget, close to $400 million a year, and much of it's funded by the American Jewish community through the Jewish Federation system. And it has really interests in many, many countries around the world. I call it like an octopus. Its fingers a little bit everywhere, and you have to figure out where all the fingers are. It's not so simple. So, and so the representatives of major Jewish communities serve on the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency. So I've been very impressed by the amazing quality of the commitment of these people. And again, I'm coming at from a much more deeper religious theological point of view. because to me, Eretz Yisrael is a divine gift to the Jewish people. And I believe that's something we need to focus on educationally with children. There's something here profound. We have an intrinsic bond because of Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, because our patriarchs, our matriarchs, that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people, and it is our heritage. It's not ours because of the UN or because of the Balfour Declaration, which are all sweet and wonderful things, but they're not the essence. The connection we have goes back to the beginnings and the dawn of Jewish history and the divine gift of this land to the Jewish people. And even though they come without that sense of spiritual perspective, their commitment is very passionate, and that's something I've learned a lot from.
Very lovely. You go to Israel when you're how old?
I go to Israel when I'm 16.
Okay. How long are you there?
I'm there 5.5 years.
What was that like for you?
It was the greatest time to be in Israel. It was between the 67 and the 73 war, between the Sixth Day and the Yom Kippur War.
Yes.
So I was young, I was excited, I was passionate. I was in a remarkable educational environment in the central Chabad yeshiva in Israel, in Kfar Chabad, where I had asked the Rebbe if I should go to and encouraged me to go. We had teachers that were giants. We encountered, and I'll mention one in particular. There was a chassid, a very prominent Chabad follower by the name of Reb Mendel Futafas. He had spent 9 years in Siberia because he had been involved in smuggling out, and I tell the story in the book, of about 1,000 Hasidic Jews after World War II out of Russia. He was a man who, imagine 9 years in Siberia, and he's our teacher. You walk in every day. Here's a man of self-sacrifice and such an energy and a passion for Judaism, and he's our role model. And we had many like him. So we were in a very unique and special place. And Israel at the time was very optimistic, very excited. This all changed after the Yom Kippur War. And it was a cutting-edge kind of time.
And then why do you leave?
I came to America, got married, and the truth is my dream...
Wait a minute. You came to
I got engaged to an American girl in Israel.
I see. You met her in Israel somehow.
Yes, through friends. And what happened was that we got married in America. And
What's her name?
Her name is Stella. Now she's a grandmother of many wonderful grandchildren.
How many?
The numbers are growing. We're at 2 minyanim. We have 20 grandchildren.
Are you kidding?
Yes.
Mazal tov.
I have 6 married children, thank God. We're done.
We
married them all. And I'm going to tell you something. Once you get the grandchildren, you don't even want to talk to the kids anymore. They're a waste of time. So I wanted to spend some time in New York to study by the Rebbe, which is very important because that was such a unique spiritual environment. The richness, the Rebbe's Farbrengens, the Hasidic gatherings that were every weekend, every Shabbos. It was just a remarkable place to be. And then, the truth is, the dream was to return to Israel, but after the Yom Kippur War, the economy was in shambles. And I wanted to run the Chabad house in Jerusalem for American college students. But there was no financial resources. So the machers and knackers, the movers and shakers of Chabad in Jerusalem came and had a meeting with me and said, listen, we'd love you to come, but we have no money. Because after the Yom Kippur War, the economy was devastated. So I became a campus Chabad rabbi at the University of Miami for 8 years.
Wonderful. At what point do you either decide or know that you want to be in the Chabad world and become a shaliach?
I think the beginning of that idea was when I was a teenager and I saw the passion of the rabbinic students. That's when the beginning started.
Which rabbinic students?
The beginning students in Montreal at the yeshiva. I would walk in every day. There were excitement. And I'll tell you what happened.
Were they Chabad?
They were all, it was a Chabad yeshiva.
See, right.
And something very happened, and I think it was 1966. The Rebbe did something amazing. He sent 6 outstanding students to establish a yeshiva in Melbourne, Australia. Now we're talking when you couldn't make a phone call. If you had an aerogram, nobody in America knows what an aerogram is today. And these 6 young students were sent by the Rebbe to Australia. Australia became a beachhead of Chabad, and in the end, the rabbinical students transformed Australia in many ways. And one of them became my pen pal, one of the senior students, who tragically got killed many years later in a car accident in Russia. But this willingness to pick up your packages, and to go to Australia for 2 years, which today, I have grandchildren in Australia. To me, I go to LAX, I get on the plane, next morning I'm there, and I'm in the park in the afternoon with my grandchildren. But Australia in 1966 was like the moon today. And I saw this passion and this excitement and this energy and this commitment and this was really something very special. And then, when I went to yeshiva in Israel, And I looked at people like his teacher, Reb Mendel, who spent all these years in Siberia, who put his life on the line to take Jews out of Russia. And afterwards, when he comes out of prison, such an amazing story. He goes to a city, he's in parole in a city called Chernowitz. So he goes to Moscow to visit the Hasidim there, and he tells the Hasidim in Moscow, in the synagogue, there would have been a small shul that was there, he says, I need to borrow some money. Why? I'm starting a business. Now, his wife had escaped on the trains out of Russia in 1947, and he was alone in Russia. So the Chassidim knew he's a reliable person. They lend him the money, and one of his compatriots goes over to him and says, Reb Mendel, was tut sich mit euch? What's going on with you? You were always on the forefront of the Rebbe's work in the underground in Russia. Not the underground that blew up buildings, the underground that educated Jewish children. What kind of business are you starting in Chernowitz? Like you was Kaligavor, you went off the way. This is not you. He says, I didn't want to tell anybody here in the shul, but the business I'm starting is I'm opening a Jewish school in Chernowitz. Now think in 1956,
Amazing.
the middle of Stalin's time.
Amazing.
Just in the post-Stalin era, you open up a school after you've been 9 years in Siberia, you're going to get a death squad. Those were our teachers.
Again, you were very, very lucky. Incidentally, you seem to know Yiddish fluently. How did you learn Yiddish if you weren't brought up speaking Yiddish?
I wanted to understand the Rebbe speaking, so I had to learn Yiddish. And there's a cultural richness in Yiddish, which you just don't have in English.
Isn't that true?
There's an expressiveness in Yiddish. There's something so special in Yiddish. So the Rebbe would speak publicly in Yiddish. That was his public language, even though he spoke other languages, French and English and Hebrew, etc., etc. So if you wanted to understand his public talks, you had to learn Yiddish well, and that's why I learned Yiddish.
That's very lovely. So explain something else to me. You've said a number of times you have a different theological perspective from non-Orthodox Jews. At the same time, you seem open to the value of non-Orthodox expressions of Judaism. Is that fair to say?
I don't agree with one thing, which is something that says, the line that I once told one of the very prominent liberal Jewish leaders in America, I said to him like this. I said, we have an unbridgeable theological gulf between us. But at the same time, I see with you a deep spirituality. So let's be honest about the unbridgeable theological gulf, and let's find the common ground and things we can agree.
Does the gulf matter?
As a person, no. As a theology, yes.
Can you explain why?
Because if you come and you tell me that God didn't give the Torah on Mount Sinai, or the Exodus didn't happen, or the central foundations in Judaism are not true, I have with that a major problem. At the same time, what I don't agree with the Orthodox community profoundly is I'm willing to look, I see a passion. I'm not talking about the average Jew today, because the average Jew is really not rooted in the theology one way or the other. He's going where he feels comfortable, whatever, but I'm talking about the leadership, the people, the core elements, the core of the Reform and Conservative movements. So most of the Orthodox world says, they've changed things, I don't want to talk to them. And I say, they changed things, I don't agree with them. But I see a Jewish spark in there that's really to be valued. And the reason they're doing what they're doing is they really care about Judaism. I may disagree with them about how they care, but I value the fact they care. Okay. And there, to me, is a remarkable difference in the way that I think Chabad sees it. We're willing to look beyond our theological differences for a common spiritual destiny.
Yes. What about Jewish pluralism? You, in essence, have endorsed Jewish pluralism in America. Would you endorse it in Israel? Does it upset you that at the moment the chief rabbinate of Israel and the Haredi community has a stranglehold politically on how Judaism is interpreted?
I don't see that in any way in that context.
You don't see it what?
I don't see that as the Haredi community, and I don't see that as the word stranglehold. I happen to believe strongly that we need in Israel, I think that the idea that we have a society where there's certain core joint system that all Jews accept when it comes to marriage and divorce, et cetera, issues of personal issues, that should be done according to halacha, to Jewish law. I feel that was going to make a stronger society that's going to connect together, and I think when you have people that will do things by different standards, you're going to bring a much greater degree of disunity. The fact of the matter is, I don't think that the issue is the Haredi the Haredim. I think you look at Israel today, about 30% of the population is Orthodox, Shomer Shabbat. If you look at the Goodstein Institute survey and the surveys, and about another 35% is heavily traditional, about 35% is secular. Most of those Jews want to see the Jewish expression of within the context of Orthodoxy. Now, I also believe that there is forces within the chief rabbinate. In particular, I believe that the Ashkenazi chief rabbi David Lau, who I know quite well, are forces that really want to open up the chief rabbinate, and there's a political tradition going back that needs to be reformed to some degree. But I do believe that a strong chief rabbinate that's compassionate, that's caring, that's sensitive, that but follows Jewish law and tradition is going to bring about a greater sense of unity than when you have different standards for everything. So I happen to feel that that the state of Israel as a Jewish state should use halacha, Jewish law, for those different things in issues of personal status.
Okay, and that would mean that at the moment, there is no way in your mind that a Jew who is converted in America by a Reform or conservative rabbi, in no way do you think that conversion should be recognized by the rabbinate of Israel when it comes to getting married in Israel at some later time?
Because at the end of the day,
I'm correct?
You are, but I want to define it. It's not just the rabbinate of Israel. Because to be very honest, when you look at world Jewry today, especially outside of the United States, the majority of communities are Orthodox. So the problem is not just with the chief rabbinate of Israel. It's with the bulk of diaspora Jewry outside of the United States and a significant portion of the United States. At the end of the day, it comes down to these theological differences. The Reform and Conservative movements see the beliefs of Judaism as being different. They've decided to change them, be it the issues of patrilineal descent, the issues of fundamentalist belief.
Not conservative Judaism.
No, they have not gone that direction yet. But on issues, when you have prominent conservative rabbis saying they don't believe the Exodus happened, this is a major theological.
One rabbi said that.
Right, but the fact is, the fact of the matter is, he's still in the movement, and he's a very fine man, and I happen to be good friends with him. But
How about David Wolpe?
Yeah, and I happen to think he's a very fine human being.
Terrific.
Our arguments are intellectual.
Right.
And
yes, but you say it as if he represents Reform Judaism.
No, what he does is, if a person has a to me, my core problem is, again, this issue of theological beliefs. So I am walking here a different line. I am valuing the spirituality and the passion and the excitement and the vigor that I'm finding in the liberal Jewish communities. But when it comes to changing fundamental beliefs of Judaism, I have a major theological problem. And I think that they need to take a little responsibility. In other words, you can't change everything and then say, recognize what I changed. Because that's really what's going on here to some degree. So take responsibility. You want to change the rules. You want to change the beliefs. Look at the basic principles of belief of Judaism according to Maimonides. And some Reform rabbis, some conservative rabbis, different levels, they've rejected some of those core beliefs, which have been historic and are, to me, axiomatic. And so therefore, don't come afterwards to me and say you're upset with me. Now, I want to tell you, it's much more difficult for me, and I'll tell you the reason why. I don't live in Jerusalem. I live in Orange County, California, where I deal with issues of people who've gone through Reform and conservative conversions, and I have to work with a great sense of compassion, but also standing up for my principles. And it's not an easy thing to do. I've lost supporters over these principles, but I happen to believe in halacha and Jewish law, 100%. At the same time, I believe strongly in compassion, and I believe that what we need to do in the Jewish community is to lower the temperature. And I want to tell you something that bothers me also, is I think that these religious movements, and I brought up this issue publicly a few times, and I just wrote a piece in the Jerusalem Post about it, need to ask themselves an important question. Chabad in Israel has a dilemma. We don't have a political party, so we get shafted all the time. We're very big in Israel. We have 700 institutions. We're all over the country, but we are the only religious group in Israel that does not have a political party. Chabad people vote in the elections.
Well, Reform movement has no political party. Conservative Judaism has no.
But let me explain you the difference. Okay, let me explain you the difference. So the Chabad could easily win a couple seats. The numbers are there. But we don't have a political party, so when the city council in Afula and Arad or Herzliya, wherever it may be, decides to give out a kindergarten or who's going to be a municipal rabbi, who's getting a piece of land for a synagogue, we get shafted.
Yes.
Now, what do we not do?
You get overlooked.
We don't get overlooked. We get, let's say, discriminated against. Now, do we go to our major donors in America, which are significant, or in Australia, or, the chairman of the United Israel Appeal in Australia is a Chabad person? I could go down a long list. Do we march them into the local Israeli consulate and scream Gewalt and make a tumult and make a... No, why? Because we're more concerned. We don't want to drive Jews who may be marginally involved with the Jewish world away from Israel.
I could not agree with you more, and it has incensed me that I want every Jewish leader in America to say to every American Jew, the issues that you're dealing with in Israel, which are problematic for non-Orthodox Jews,
100%, I agree.
in no way should diminish one's commitment, support, love for the state
Yeah, but
of Israel.
I'm even going further. I will not go to my American supporters
Yes.
to use them as a lever
Yes.
to help my institutions in Israel,
Yes.
even though we would have a lot of success.
Yes, I understand.
Because it would weaken their feeling or the way they see Israel or the
understand.
Jewish community.
I appreciate what
and
you're
more
saying.
than that, I would never use the central institutions of the Jewish community, be it the federations, be it AIPAC and others, to use them as a podium to advance those positions.
I agree with you
And
entirely.
so therefore,
But forgive me, I don't know how that relates to this part of the discussion.
because I'll tell you how it relates to. I think what they've done, what the liberal movements have done, is created a conflict in a certain sense. They have to ask themselves a question about responsible leadership. And as if there's creating this conflict, if they want to get support in Israel, go get the people behind you. Go door to door, knock on the doors, get the people behind you. Right now, there's 550 Orthodox synagogues in Tel Aviv, and there's one Reform temple, Bet Daniel. That's what it is. The Jews are voting with their feet in Israel. You want the people, get them. And win an election and do what you want. The reason they don't have a seat in the Knesset is they can't get a seat in the Knesset. So therefore, let's be real. Will we end up sitting at a federation boardroom or a Jewish community leadership environment or a donor and say, the donor may say, you know what, I'm not giving money to Israel anymore because I'm upset? Or will the Jewish community be fighting about these internal issues instead of worried about the bigger problems in this country here in the United States? So what Chabad has chosen to do and is that we have decided not to take the issues that bother us into the public atmosphere in America because it may undermine the people's commitment to Israel. And so even though we can be upset about certain things at certain times, and I would tell you the most classic example is that Chabad has very strong positions about the security of the state of Israel. When it came to Gaza, the disengagement, as much as we felt it was a mistake, and we did organize a major prayer service at the wall and we did meet privately with the Prime Minister at the time, Arik Sharon, who had a very strong connection with Chabad. I mean, his children were all bar mitzvah in Chabad. I mean, his nephew married the niece of one of the most prominent Chabad rabbis in Israel. His personal rabbi was Rabbi Shlemke Medanchik, one of the Chabad leaders in Israel. This was not a light connection, but they met with him privately and said, Arik, what are you doing? But the point is that we didn't go to the streets, especially in America, as much as we disagreed with it. So this approach of putting the welfare of the community, I'll tell you a classic story. This is so amazing. 35, 40 years ago, a group of the leaders of the largest Chabad institutions in America, come to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They say to him, we want to establish a Karen, a fund, where we're going to bring donors at a minimal level of $100,000 to give to the Rebbe money that he will be able to develop Chabad to the next level at the Rebbe's discretion. In the end, the fund was established, and they raised something like $40 million. 40 years ago, $40 million is a tremendous amount of money. The Rebbe gave a few conditions. And one of the conditions was, as long as you do no damage to the United Jewish Appeal. Chabad was getting from the United Jewish Appeal, from the Jewish Federation system 40 years ago, garnished, very little. But what did the Rebbe realize? That if we make a big worldwide campaign, a lot of them are going to be the same donors, because a lot of the donors to federations are donors to Chabad. Maybe it'll undermine the federation system, and that won't be good for the Jewish world. Mm-hmm. So he says, you can raise the money from me, but only if you don't hurt another organization, which is not benefiting me. That's leadership.
You're absolutely right. There are nuances here I want to hear you speak to. You welcome everyone at Chabad synagogues all over America, correct?
Correct.
But you would not want them welcomed as those who are, many of them, are Jews who may come from intermarriages. Many of them may be Jews who are converted by a Reform or a conservative rabbi, or even some Orthodox rabbis now who are not kasher in terms of the Orthodox, the chief rabbin in Israel. But you don't want those same people to have the status of Jew by the state of Israel under the law of return. Am I correct?
I'm not. I don't want. I'm not to speak to the law.
No. You.
The law. I feel that
I want people to understand.
Fine. So I happen to believe that halacha, and I do this.
Yes, but I'm not. I understand your position. You have there's an integrity and authenticity to your position.
Right.
By the way, JBS is not an Orthodox Jewish channel.
I know you aren't.
And my own perspective here is that every movement of Judaism makes a contribution. It has deficiencies, but it makes a contribution. And that ultimately, I believe.
So let me ask you.
So much about this is Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people as a whole. I understand, however, and respect the integrity of your position. You are a halachic Sinai Jew.
That's
you
right.
believe the Torah was given at Sinai, and that the law is a product of Sinai.
100%.
Okay. And it's not where the entire Jewish world is.
100%.
Okay, so there are people who are coming to your synagogue, to Chabad synagogues, who are embraced and feel welcome. They don't understand that as much as they are welcome in local Chabads all over the country, philosophically, you would not want the state of Israel to welcome them as Jews.
And I will tell you that I don't agree with you in one sense, because we're, at least in my instance, we're honest with our people.
They know this?
They know this, and I make a point to tell them the truth. Because,
you're unusual.
Because I want to be honest with people, and because we have to be honest.
Okay,
but at the same time,
yes.
At the same time, and this is where the compassion comes in. There is people who are a product of intermarriages. There are intermarried couples that come in, and this is a dilemma we deal with all the time. But I believe that the best system is honesty. And if somebody asks me, or I will tell them, that we believe in halakha and Jewish law. This is our greatest strength. It's also to a certain degree a challenge, because sometimes people will not like what were our positions. And I have suffered because of this in the past, because I've took a position in principle and lost donors or supporters, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end, even those people that maybe I lost, usually was temporarily, they came around, they understood that my position was not political, but it was a belief of us.
Absolutely.
And as one of the leaders of the Reform movement once told me, he says to me, we once had a discussion about this, and he says to me, but I never want you to do something against your beliefs. Because I told him, I'm a Shulchan Aruch Yid. I follow the code of Jewish law. But what I do feel it's important, and this is lacking in the Orthodox world, is sensitivity and compassion.
Which would be expressed how, David?
By first being caring about each individual person.
But it wouldn't change behavior, would it?
No, it would change in a sense that when a person walks in, that you say to them, listen, we have an issue here, but I just wanted to tell you how deeply I care about you, and I want you to tell you this is the path which is open
by the way,
to you.
that's very sweet. But that's the tone. This loving tone is the tone you'd like to see the state of Israel adopt while taking a halachic position.
100%.
And therefore, we would say to you would say to someone who was converted by a Reform rabbi, you're important to us. We're so happy you
and
are
if
in
you
Israel.
if you would like, with time, if you want to make a choice to progress in your Jewish observance and become more observant, the door is open in front of you.
But in the meantime, you can't become an Israeli citizen under the law of return.
Well, the present law allows anybody who is born by
Yes, I know,
Jewish.
but that's not what the chief rabbinate wants, and I want to know
No,
what
the
you
chief
want.
rabbinate is not trying to change that. The chief rabbinate in Israel
They
right
just
now.
had a law.
That's not what the conversion law about. The conversion law was only about one thing. The conversion law, as far as I know, and I haven't read the law, was only about conversions done within the state of Israel to create some kind of system.
Okay.
Has no bearing on the
by
law
the
of
way,
return. No
yes,
bearing at all.
Everybody should understand. At the moment, it doesn't matter who converts you.
Right.
If you're converted in America, it doesn't matter who converts you. You can enter Israel under the law of return. You can't, however, then marry.
That's true.
Okay. And you would say to somebody at a Chabad house in Orange County, I love you, you're important, understand, we have standards.
That's exactly
And
it.
there are halachic standards, and this doesn't in any way mean, I think, less of you as a person.
That's exactly the
But
point.
as a Jew, you don't qualify in my in my
Well, in the historic context of Judaism.
yeah, which you're committed to.
Which I'm committed to 100%.
Okay. By the way, if you make that clear to the people you deal with, then I think you have nothing to apologize for. I think, however, there are many Jews who enjoy Chabad and don't understand the philosophy
That may
you've
be
just
true,
said.
but my philosophy is always to be honest.
Okay.
And you know what I believe comes with the honesty? Much greater respect. It's a very interesting balancing act that Chabad rabbis, a tense world we live in, and I'll tell you what it is. When you live in Borough Park or in Muncie or some religious community, everything's pretty clear in black and white.
Absolutely.
They deliver you kosher sushi to your house. But when you're living in a nuanced world of Jews of all kinds of backgrounds, and you are trying to maintain your integrity of your belief system and trying to be true to who you really are, that you believe in halacha, Jewish law, and at the same time you want to be open and welcoming, there is a constant tension in what you are doing. And this is a tension that I feel is central to the life of a Chabad Shliach. But the fact is, we are who we are. And we have to be true to who we are. Now, the problem is that we have what's called a mirrored problem. In the Orthodox world, we have a harshness which is very unfortunate. Some of it comes from an insecurity and a fear, and some of it comes from not knowing the other world, and some of it, with all due respect, when you spend 20, 30 years listening to the Rebbe, he made you into a different kind of person. In the Reformer conservative community, there was an ad sponsored by the Reform movement in Israel. Enough with the Haredim. If they put an ad in America, enough with the Muslims, enough with the blacks, the first ones who would scream Gewalt would be the Reform movement. The hypocrisy is beyond belief. So there is also a hostility within the liberal Jewish world toward traditional Judaism, where how many times rabbis get up in the pulpits and they said, in New Jersey, Reform rabbi said he does not want an Erev, which is a thing you can circle a community so people can carry in the Shabbos in his community. He doesn't want religious Jews moving in. Imagine if he said that about blacks. They would tar and feather the guy. So the tragedy here is that what I see is the bias and the prejudice is a reflection of each other.
Okay. I just don't want to compare the worst of one with the best of the other.
I don't want to compare either. But the fact, what I am trying to say is that I have spent my life trying to live up to the teachings of the Rebbe, which taught us, number one, to be true to who we are, and number two, to have true care and compassion for other human beings. And it's easy to live in one or two extremes, either on the left or the right, the liberal Jewish end of the community, the more religious end of the Jewish community. The hard thing is to live in the middle.
You're absolutely right. In the same vein, in terms of, again, the inclusiveness of a Chabad synagogue in general, at the same time your commitment to halakha, would you have any problem with a third section at the Western Wall?
Yes, I would.
Disassociated with the main section where there is a mechitza, where at the wall there could be an egalitarian section?
Well, right now they've already, this is really beyond my pay scale. It's a decision to be made in Israel.
I'm asking you a decision. I want to know whether you'd be comfortable. Would you be comfortable with that?
I personally...
Or would this be something you'd fight over?
The fight that's going on right now is not about the section, it's about the status of Reform Judaism.
I understand, but I'm asking you about the wall.
It's not my issue, it's something to be dealt with.
I'm asking you.
So I'm telling you an answer, that I believe that these are issues that need to be resolved. An issue, I happen to believe in halacha.
Please.
Okay, so
you've answered every other question I've asked you.
So I'm answering you this. I believe that everything should be done according to Jewish law. And that means I believe the section should be one for men and one for women. I can't believe that something should be not done according to halacha, because I believe halacha is a guiding factor in our lives.
In American Jewish life, you've already told me that you recognize there are institutions with validity that contribute even to your own understanding, which are not halachic, and you respect them. Why can't there be a section at the wall that's not halachic?
Okay,
not by the main.
There is already
Robinson's Arch.
There's already a section there, and it's going to stay there. There's no change.
That's not good enough. I want to know why you don't say.
Because
look, I don't want it infringing on here. I'm not going to.
Am I going to go protest it? No.
Yes.
I'm not going to protest
Okay.
it, but the answer to the question, do I feel that it should be done according to halacha only? Yes.
Yes, but you understand you feel the same way about a Reform synagogue in America.
Right, but I'm not, the difference, what I'm answering you is like this, that I happen to be consistent in my view in Allah. I think every Reformed temple should also pray according to halacha. Jewish
But they
law.
don't.
Okay, so
and
therefore,
you don't, and you
so
don't,
there-
but you said to me you respect the difference in theological approach that leads to a halachic.
But I'm not- but
it's
I'm-
not that you would like every Jew to become a halachic Jew.
100%. But what I'm not saying is I'm not validating. See, the line that I won't cross is like this. I don't want to validate something which is antithetical to halacha. And I don't believe in that's what I don't want, the line that I'm not going to cross. So to tell you, do I endorse something which is antithetical to halacha, the answer is no. The fact of the matter is the political reality, which has nothing to do with my world, because I have no say in these things. There is a section like that already at the wall. And it's there.
And you would make an issue of it.
I don't make issues in Israel, and I don't think the Orthodox community in Israel has made an issue over it. The issue they made over was the conditions that they wanted to be added.
They wanted one entrance.
They wanted one entrance, and they wanted to have a committee. These are issues which the religious parties in Israel are arguing about. But the point is, I happen to believe in the process of halacha, Jewish law. So on a personal level, would I sanction it? No. It's there. It may be there.
If somebody comes to your synagogue and is about to be given an aliyah, is there any belief test of that Jew?
No.
So are you telling me that in your synagogue, by the way, I know the answer, but I want to give you I want it to come from your mouth, not mine. In your synagogue, a Jew has the right to whatever theological perspective.
Only
they
one
wish.
line I wouldn't cross.
Wait a minute,
Unless it was
let
a
me
Jews-
finish.
Mhm.
Let me finish. But you expect them to be wearing a talit, to come up to the Torah, to say the brachot, to kiss the Torah, and in that case, whatever their personal beliefs are, in no way disqualifies them from having an aliyah.
Only
your
in one
synagogue.
condition not. If it was a person who claims to be a Jew for Jesus.
Aha,
That's
okay.
what I would not do.
If he makes a public declaration.
That's
okay.
right. That's other than that,
Yeah.
nothing.
If for some reason he's sort of meshuggah, it's in his head, and he never tells anybody, that you don't care.
Right, but if I wouldn't take a person who believes in that context.
I respect that. The reason I'm asking is, there are many Jews who do not believe in the God you believe in, who do not believe in Torah Misinai, who are not halachic Jews, but they are committed, observant in a different way. And they could visit your synagogue for a whole host of reasons. And my point is, you would not discriminate against them. And I'm saying this in a positive way, that people should understand that as profound a commitment to halakha as you have, even within the halakha, when it comes to how you behave, there is a wide latitude.
Right. So if a person is a Jew and he comes into the shul, it doesn't make a difference to me. I had a guy who came to me. He says, my daughter had a child, and she's a lesbian. Can we name the child in the shul? I said, why not? She's a Jewish child. Made my pleasure, and we did it. Made a kiddush also.
At the same time, you would not be Masada or Kedushin at a gay wedding.
No, I would not.
Because that's against halakha.
That's right. But then I tried to get her to enroll this child in a Jewish school, because her child's a Jewish child that deserves the same Jewish education than any other child deserves.
What would you recommend? And again, this is not for you. I'm not asking what would you do. I'm not asking you what would you recommend for other Chabad or Jews with your orientation. I want to know what you would recommend to Reform or conservative rabbis who are confronted all the time by members of their congregation who say, we've fallen in love with somebody who's not Jewish, but we want a Jewish wedding. We want to stand under a chuppah. We want you, our rabbi, to be there. And I'm sure you know, at B'nai Jeshurun here in New York, one of the outstanding, it was a conservative movement, it's a conservative synagogue, it's now basically autonomous. But Rabbi at B'nai Jeshurun has said publicly he is now going to perform, whatever that means, intermarriages. And there are those who argue they're going to get married anyway. in the spirit of Chabad, of drawing people in, there are those who argue that it's time for non-Orthodox rabbis, not for Orthodox rabbis,
So let me answer the
to
question.
be present at the chuppah of a Jew and non-Jew. What do you say to
Absolutely no. And I want to tell you something
Say it
very,
again.
absolutely no.
them? Because
And because the Torah says no. Because God told us no at Mount Sinai. Now, and I want to take it a step further. There's a very interesting debate in the Jewish world. The liberal movements, and a lot of the rabbis are more traditional, some of them depends where or whatever, than some of their congregations. And then there's the great unknown that they don't talk about, is that they're getting pressure from the boards because they want to keep their jobs, but that they really don't talk about publicly too much. They've argued if we lower the barriers, we're going to bring in a larger group of people. Who today probably brings in more Jews than anybody else from the peripheral is Chabad. And we're the ones that follow halacha. So this argument that we're going to be more welcoming by changing the rules falls apart because we're more successful in it than anybody else, and we don't change the rules. So I feel that this is it's just simply not true. And at the end, what you're doing is when you give sanction to something which is not considered right in the eyes of Torah, in the end you are endorsing it. So will they decide to get married? That's their own choice. But we have to try to be active. You know, there was, when Menachem Begin in the 50s he came to the Rebbe many times. And he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him there is a family in Paris. Then he was the head of the opposition. He wasn't such a big macher. He wasn't a prime minister. Whose daughter is wants to intermarry, and she comes from a Betar background. I want to pay your airline ticket to go to Paris to convince her not to marry. So Menachem Begin told the Rebbe, I'll do it. He went to Israel. He went to France, convinced her. She got married eventually to an Israeli and whatever, and her life changed. Do I believe that's going to happen in many cases? I'm not living in that fantasy land. But when you stand up for principle, principle stands up. And we have stood up for principle, and many times we have suffered from it. I've lost major donors because of it. I've been hurt in different kinds of ways. But I believe that when you have integrity in Judaism, and the reason not to do it, and this is again where the theological differences are there. I believe God came on Mount Sinai and gave the Jewish people a series of commandments. One of them, Jews should marry Jews, have Jewish children, follow Torah, observe, etc., etc., etc. And therefore, I don't believe we should change that. And when you begin changing it, and it's compassionate and it's caring, etc., and they'll raise their kids Jewishly, which what does that mean? How much bagels, how much lox, and what's Jewishly mean? It's a very ambiguous kind of term. And I'm out there in the front lines. I see what's going on. I'm not the guy in New York, you know, the religious Jew in Muncie who doesn't know the front. I'm dealing with this every single day of my life. So I think it's a terrible mistake. And we're seeing now, you know, there was a series of research studies done about patrilineal descent. And they said why? Because they used to go through at least some conversion. Now they don't even go through a conversion because of patrilineal descent, which was created by the Reform movement, didn't have really an historical basis. So when you lower standards, in the end, you end up with those standards. So I want to go back to my point before. Care and compassion and principles. And when you go with those 2 points, it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be easy. But in the end, it's going to, and most importantly, it's the right thing to do. Not because, you know, somebody, a rabbi I know wrote an article recently in a Jewish newspaper, we have to hold the line. That's an absurd argument. Why hold the line? If God came on Mount Sinai and he told the Jewish people, I want you to do A, B, C, and D, and that's the foundational belief of Judaism, then you tell the Jew, you should do A, B, and C. Is they going to do everything? No. But that's what you tell the person. And it's not always easy. And then we're also dealing after the fact with a lot of people who come to us intermarried, and we have to be straight with them when their kids are not halachically Jewish, and we have to be honest. But I've also seen people that have become, with time, the Jewish spouse gets more involved with Judaism, and the non-Jewish spouse gets more involved, and it's a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's got to be done properly. But see, there's a very interesting philosophical question, which Jews face, was how to deal with modernity. When you lived in the shtetl, little village in Europe, you had no opportunities. There was a pale settlement. You were maybe in a ghetto in Morocco. You couldn't do things. Today, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. Jack Lew was Secretary of Treasury. We go to shul every Shabbos. And now, because Chabad's
Modern Orthodox.
No, he was going to, when he was in Washington, he went to Chabad.
Yeah.
And now we have the other side of the political spectrum because we don't endorse anybody. We got Ivanka Trump coming to our shul in Washington, D.C. And she's baking humantash. So you can do, Joe Lieberman almost became vice president of the United States, Orthodox Jew. You can do whatever you want in this country. So the question is, how do we deal with modernity? So parts of the Jewish world said, let's take the ideas of Western culture and we'll put them into Judaism. That's, I would say, a lot of the liberal Jewish world. The Orthodox world said, you know what, a lot of the Orthodox world said, this is a dangerous world out there. Let's build ourselves our little world. We'll put a moat around us. And I believe Chabad had a much more courageous approach, and I call it in the book principled engagement. In other words, we have something important to say to the society around us, and we're going to say it. We're going to engage the world. At the same time, we're going to remain true to our principles. It's a much harder row to hoe. And you know where you see this so interestingly? In Israeli society. Because in Israeli society, Chabad is not like other parts of the Orthodox world that will not send their sons to the army. After they finish yeshiva, which takes a few years usually, they go to the army. I was in Israel just recently, and I spent Shabbos with a man who's today 50 years old in a town called Kfar Chabad, where I spent 5.5 years of my life. And his uncle was my study partner in yeshiva. And it was the Shabbos before the Rebbe's yahrzeit. I was asked to speak in this community, et cetera, and he took me to his home. And that Shabbos was 50 years to the day that his father, who was an Israeli paratrooper, lost his life defending the country, just after the Six-Day War. So that willingness also in Israel to engage the society and be part of the society and to serve in the army but at the same time, you don't have to agree with everything in the secular modern Israeli culture. So this middle ground of engaging the world, I believe, is one of the central big ideas that the Rebbe had. And we didn't take the approach of insularity, which is really an act of insecurity, or the approach of taking in the Western values, which is an act of capitulation in my mind. But to do engagement, that's an act of courage. So you may see I happen to feel that I'm reflecting those values of Chabad, the willingness to engage the world, to try to remain true to who you are, which is a very difficult thing to do. And it's easy to fall in one side or the other.
Okay, David, what is the secret of Chabad?
The secret of Chabad, what I believe comes down to, number one, love your fellow man, your fellow Jew as yourself. Number two, serve Hashem with your own efforts. You have to struggle to internalize Judaism. It's not something you get without hard emotional lifting. Number three, you have to be a Jewish leader. You have to take responsibility for Jewish destiny. Number four, remain true to Jewish tradition and law. Don't compromise. Remain true to the ideals. Number five, be willing to engage the world around you while remaining true to Judaism, but offer something to the broader society. And finally, we can all bring the world to a tipping point. We can bring Mashiach.
Mazal Tov, you are out of this world.
Thank you very much.
You are out of this. You are out of this world. You touched my heart when I met you the first time. The only thing I regret is that you're a coast away, and that I can't have you at this table all the time.
Well,
but called Tuva Hatzlacha to you. Best of luck on the book.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you. David Eliezrie, Chabad's National Liaison to Jewish Federations of North America, the Rabbi of Congregation Beth Meir HaKohen in Yorba Linda, California, and the author of The Secret of Chabad.
And they can get it on Amazon and all kinds of good places.
As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts you may have to any of the things David had to say on this edition of L'Chaim. Please just email me or post on our JBS Facebook page or write me. I look forward to hearing your reactions to my meeting with David Eliezrie. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the non-profit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.